Hey everyone, I'm MattTGM, and today I'm back with another episode of my series where I rank the top 24 video games I've ever played. Apologies for this episode being slightly late, but today we have 7 entries on the list instead of 6, so I feel it makes up for it. Without any further ado, let's get started with the video. Okay, this is the last game on the list that is largely here because of my childhood. It's also the last racing game, and in my opinion, the best. I'm going to keep this super brief, seeing as I still don't have much to say about games like these. To summarize, it's fun, challenging, the realistic driving is phenomenal, the car roster is expansive especially for the time, the upgrade system was simple to understand and it helped teach me what makes a car fast, the races themselves were mostly fair and offered much variety, and the courses are all good looking and a pleasure to drive through, especially with the kick-ass soundtrack playing in the background. The negatives, I haven't had a chance to play it in ages, and the game was kind of impossible back when I was 6 and I used the walls to get around corners. However, I still love the game a lot. It was one of the best games from my entire childhood, and one of the best games I've ever played even to this day. That's basically all there is to it. The next Assassin's Creed game on the list is the third best one in the series that I've played, in my personal opinion. Rogue was the final game in the second generation of Assassin's Creed games, with the single button free running and the counter button killing. It was also the second Assassin's Creed game right after Black Flag, apart from Unity, and while it wasn't as good as Assassin's Creed 4, hence the order on the list, it was still fantastic. The gameplay was heavily inspired by Black Flag, but seeing as Black Flag's gameplay was already so good, it wasn't really a problem, and in fact Rogue improved on it. The gameplay was fine-tuned to near perfection, and it was the best it could have possibly been for that engine of Assassin's Creed. The parkour had great new tweaks allowing for quicker movement that just looked so cool. You could now climb on more things, there were new ways to quickly ascend the buildings or cross a large gap, such as the zip lines, and it was all a pleasure to experience. The land combat was also improved. While the changes weren't mind-blowing, they were still really fun. I mean, you get a freaking grenade launcher, what's not to love? The swords played the same, the guns played the same, the air rifle was basically just the blow dart launcher but it could now shoot fireworks. But did I mention the grenade launcher? It's basically just an air rifle on steroids, and you can also use it to blow things the fuck up. You also get a gas mask to help against the smoke bombs that enemies would use against you, and that was pretty neat I suppose. All the tools apart from the grenade launcher work basically the same as Black Flag, but hey, if it isn't broken, don't change it. The stealth combat was also improved. I mean, you still couldn't actually sneak, but at least extra elements were added to make it more interesting. Because in the game, you play as a Templar, you get all the assassins trying to assassinate you. These stalkers can be detected with this little donut thingy in your eagle vision, which was inspired by the Black Flag multiplayer. You could either get them to come out of their hiding places with fireworks, or just counter-kill them when they attack you, because for assassins they kinda suck. This was a good addition, and it even caught me off guard a couple times. Like, maybe 3. The ship segments were also improved, with the cannons now being more powerful, the puckle guns being awesome, and the burning oil being a suitable replacement for the fire barrels. The fact that the other boats could now invade your ship as well was quite cool, and it added more depth to your ship battles. And speaking of ship battles, the legendary battles, for the most part, were honestly a letdown from Black Flag. They were too damn easy. I breezed through the first 3 legendary battles with no problem, whereas in Black Flag, all of them were really tough. However, I said most of the battles were disappointing. The final legendary battle in the game, the goddamn Storm Fortress, was a terrifying encounter. The ship was so incredibly strong, you fought it in the middle of this massive storm, and it called in 2 other powerful ships when it got close to dying, stamping on all my hopes of winning. The battle was absolutely intense, it was torturous, and it felt so damn amazing to defeat it. I'm talking Dark Souls levels of feeling good after you defeat something. The world was also fantastic, with the northern atmosphere really being shown. You really got the impression that you were in a freezing place, and a lot of the places were genuinely beautiful. The city of New York also felt more full of life than it did in Assassin's Creed 3, and it was a pleasure to explore. The hunting mechanic was also improved, with the harpooning segments requiring more actual effort from the players, and the land hunting having more potential animals to slaughter. There was also a ton of stuff to do in the world, such as forts, outposts, colonial battles, and more that I'm forgetting to mention. The story of the game was fantastic. The whole draw of the game is that you play as a Templar, making this more of a Templar's Creed game if anything. However, the best part is that you get to see Shay Patrick Cormac, the protagonist, initially start off as an assassin and struggle with the assassin's beliefs. He finally decides to abandon the creed after they accidentally make him slaughter thousands of innocent people in order to do what he thought was right. This backstory was more interesting than just starting as a Templar, being a Templar, and doing Templar things. and seeing Shay take his time to think about the aftermath of his choices and struggling to find the resolve to hunt down his former friends and colleagues was a really cool thing to witness. The journey through the 7 Years' War was a real pleasure to play through as well. However, the flaw of the game is the story, or rather the length of it. It only spans 7 sequences in total, and some of those sequences only have 2 missions. That's way too short for my liking, and it made the main story rather quick to play through, probably because they were putting more effort into Unity's story. And look how that turned out. I mean, do you see Unity on the list? However, this flaw is actually not that bad. While the story is indeed short, it doesn't really need to be that much longer. It's already a great tale, and if it can tell all that in a short time, good on the writers. However, it makes me think it could be even better if they'd just made it longer. You can form your own opinion on that, but I personally really love the story, even despite the length. Shay was a very nice assassin turned Templar who makes his own luck, and he won't let you forget it. The side characters were all memorable, with Adewale returning from Black Flag, Hope Jensen being probably my favourite side character in the game, apart from Haytham Kenway, and we even get to see a younger Achilles. Overall, Rogue is a very solid experience, and while it may only be the 3rd best Assassin's Creed game on the list, it's an absolutely phenomenal game, and with the remastered version, I look forward to my next playthrough. Oh my god, this game is fun. Yep, we're opening it like that. God of War 3 Remastered, solely from a gameplay perspective, is one of the most fun games I've ever played. The hack and slash style of gameplay of tearing through hundreds of enemies in single battles is absolutely exhilarating, and I loved pretty much every second of it. Apart from those fucking satyrs, seriously, fuck those jumpy boys. The different weapons offered different enough gameplay styles, and they were all great to play around with the tools also offering similar enjoyment. The Blades of Exile were great all-rounder weapons with the best magic ability in the game and the coolest design, to the point where I wish they were the blades in God of War 4 instead of the Blades of Chaos. I didn't use the claws much at first, but I actually have discovered the potential utility with all the different souls you can summon, and it's great. I also really love the telekinetic chains. They are a great addition, mainly because they just look awesome. The Nemean Cestus are the main weapons that I use apart from the blades, and they're slow, forceful, and terrific fun to use, plus they actually come in handy during the story missions more than once. It's so satisfying to just be able to punch everything out of your way, especially when you're using goddamn lion faces. I cast aside the Nemesis whips at first and pretty much never used them, but I've grown to appreciate their speed, combo potential, and their ability to recharge the Rage of Sparta, to the point where they're probably my 3rd most used weapon. Speaking of Rage of Sparta, I absolutely love the Blade of Olympus, and I really wish we could use it more in the game. Its moveset, while limited, is so satisfying to use, with the way you can just tear through enemies with minimal effort. And I really love the X attack, how you just slam it into the ground and send a shockwave through your enemies. It's so cool. The Bow of Apollo was a neat tool for puzzles, and one of the only tools I actively used. The Head of Helios, aside from the really cool way you get it, was alright I suppose, but I didn't use it too much. It's just a bit too niche, and same goes for the Boots of Hermes. However, the boots are really fun when it comes to running over walls. It just looks great, like you're a parkour expert. Probably one of the most impressive facts about the game is the amazing spectacle. The sheer scale of the game is absolutely phenomenal, with the Titans being massive, like the size of levels in themselves, and there's like 20 of these things. The views are also incredible, and you frequently interact with the Titans and other massive objects in the environment. They aren't just background pieces. Some of the bosses are also huge, and combined with the gorgeous graphics, especially in the remastered version, which again is the one on the list, they were made even more awesome to see. The bosses, however, are a little hit or miss. This mainly comes down to the game and God of War in general being generous as to what it considers a boss and what it doesn't. Things like Hephaestus and Helios are considered bosses, when they're really just glorified quicktime events. Hermes and Scorpius are also pretty average, but at least they actually have fights, and Hermes was funny to chase him down and cut his legs off. Saying that, I kind of sound like a terrible person, don't I? Should probably go get therapy. The other 5 bosses in the game were all absolutely incredible, and I loved them. If possible, all of them would be on my top 50 bosses in all gaming, but with the rules I have for that video, that's not really possible. So yeah, they're really good bosses. The gore of the game was enough to be satisfying, but not enough to be disgusting. I reckon Mortal Kombat X could learn from that. Just a thought. The story has been criticized for the over-the-top brutality and the downgrade of Kratos as a character, but I enjoyed it anyway, and his development at the end is pretty good, and it's done through really compelling storytelling, especially the fear sequences in his mind. I also really like the ending of the game, with Kratos finally deciding to take responsibility for his actions, sacrificing himself, and setting up for God of War 4. And believe me, we'll get to that later on the list. The main reason I like the story is that it just keeps delivering epic set pieces over and over and over again, such as the battle with Kronos, the duel with Poseidon, the final showdown against Zeus, and so much more. It's amazing. Honestly, the sheer fun factor of the game made me consider putting it up a lot higher, and if you just go off a fun gameplay perspective alone, this game would have definitely made the top 5 and maybe even top 3. However, we don't just judge games on their gameplay here, and while God of War 3's story is enjoyable, and I don't really mind it or Kratos being a dick, and I think his development at the end is actually pretty compelling, the other 9 games are just a bit more well-rounded, which lands them higher on the list. Even with that said, I'll always be excited for my next playthrough of God of War 3 Remastered. Hell, I fucking platinumed the game. That shows dedication right there. Batman Arkham City was one of the best sequels I've ever experienced, and objectively, it's probably the best Arkham game. It delivers a great story, great atmosphere, great gameplay, a great world, everything is just great. While Knight's gameplay is better, Origin's bosses are better, and Asylum, oh my god, we'll get there, but City is one of the best all-rounded experiences I've ever played, and certainly the best all-round experience in the Arkham series. Let's break it down. It was about as good as a sequel to Arkham Asylum could have been when it comes to approving a game. The gameplay was great, a fantastic upgrade over the previously mentioned Asylum. The new enemies and weapon types switched up the flow of the fights, the new combat techniques made beating down large groups of enemies massively fun, and the different upgrades greatly added to the experience. Free flow focus was an awesome addition, and taking down massive groups with that active was more satisfying than most things in gaming in general, when you really got into the swing of things. All of the old gadgets now had more effective ways to be used in free flow, for the most part, and they were all great. The stealth was also massively improved, with new takedown tactics and new types of enemies to really shake up your Predator experience. Even getting around the world was improved, as you can now grapple while running, the gliding was improved, and the awesome grapple boost upgrade meant that you could get from one side of the map all the way to the other without even touching the ground once, and it felt so good. Speaking of the map, the world itself was also massively improved. Arkham Asylum was focused more around being stuck in this claustrophobic asylum, therefore there weren't too many exploration options in terms of open world, rather that you explored the buildings and the secret passageways within them. In City, you get the massive Arkham City map to explore. With all the new movement options, it is a pleasure to explore this. You get many different districts, and even the mysterious Wonder City which runs right below the main building of Arkham City itself. Now, getting onto something else that really benefits from the wide open map, the side quests. In Arkham Asylum, all you could really do was find the Riddler trophies and the Amadeus Arkham messages, but here, you have several side quests that cover a wide range of things. The best part is how much detective work you get to do. In the mission with Deadshot, you get to hunt down the assassin using bullet trajectories and noise, and it results in you actually making him miss his target. Though then it gives us a very disappointing boss fight, and I use boss in massive quotation marks. Another example is Hush, or Thomas Elliot, where you track down the elusive killer by using the bodies of his victims, and we're even led to believe that Bruce Wayne is killing these people. It turns out to be Thomas Elliot, as previously mentioned, and it's one of the more sinister characters in the game, and his plotline is quite dark on the whole. The other side quests are all good, with Mad Hatter, Mr. Freeze and Azrael being my favourites. However, there is one questionable side mission. The Riddler really stepped up his riddling game here, because now there are over 400 Riddler trophies and challenges to complete, plus an extra 40 if you play as Catwoman, and you can't just run around looking for them anymore. You need to complete challenges, some of which might require a specific gadget that you don't have. And it's overall the reason that I've never defeated him, even to this day, because you need 400 trophies in total in order to take him down, even though I have done all the challenge rooms leading up to him, where you have to save the cops. Coming back to something I said earlier, Catwoman was also in the game, and her addition was pretty good as well. She offered a different gameplay style to Batman, and in the combat sections, she was just as fun to play as, with her quick speed. However, while she does work in the stealth sections, her lack of an arsenal and slower grapple mechanic does get a bit frustrating, though it's still overall fun. The story was great, with Catwoman playing a small but important role, while Batman is obviously the main character. It shows Batman suffering from the effects of being poisoned by the Joker, forcing him to rush around to find a cure to save himself, the Joker, and a large part of Gotham City, all while trying to halt the mysterious Protocol 10 developed by Hugo Strange. It wasn't as good as Asylum to me, but it certainly was very close, and what happens at the end actually surprised me the first time I saw it. Coming back to a common point, the bosses in the game were hit or miss. Bosses like Deadshot, the Mad Hatter, Two-Face, Harley Quinn, and even Joker to an extent were all pretty much miss. And while I could get a scrap of fun from the Joker, there wasn't really much to get out of them. However, when the bosses hit, They hit hard. Solomon Grundy, Ra's al Ghul, and Clayface are all amazing, and Mr. Freeze is so damn good that to this day I hold him as one of the best bosses in all of gaming. Overall, Arkham City is pretty much a perfect sequel to Arkham Asylum, and it really established the Arkham series as one of the greatest gaming lineups of the modern day, and I will always hold it close to my heart for that. Coming from one superhero game to another, we jump from DC to Marvel with Insomniac's Spider-Man. This is the ultimate Spider-Man experience when it comes to gaming, and it's my second best game of 2018. This is hands down the best Spider-Man experience I've ever had. Better than the Tobey Maguire films, all the old Spider-Man games, and even the MCU. It's just so damn good. Let's start with the obvious high point. You feel so much like Spider-Man, and a massive part of that comes down to the web slinging. This mechanic was absolutely perfect. It was super easy to use, only requiring a single button for the basic movement, but it still felt incredible and like it had actual physics. The track system and point launches only added to the enjoyment factor, and in all honesty, it's one of the main reasons the game lands this high on the list. That mechanic never stopped being fun no matter how much I used it. Moving on to the rest of the game, the combat was really fun, for the most part. It took a while to get used to. It feels similar to the Arkham games, while also being very different. You go flying all over the place, you fight enemies while in the air, and there's several different gadgets you can use to take down all your foes. Once you get the hang of it, it can be really fun, but it can also get really annoying. You'll see what I mean later on. The stealth in Spider-Man was actually just as satisfying as the combat, if not more so. The different ways to distract your enemies were all good, and the stealth takedowns were satisfying as it felt like something Spider-Man could actually do. They were done really well, and it was a pleasure to play through. I even kind of enjoyed the segments as MJ and Miles. They weren't outstanding, and they kind of confused me at first, but I still liked them, with my favourites being the ones where you're Miles going through the site of the terror attack, the one where you're MJ going through Norman's apartment, and the one when you're Miles again, but this time trying to sneak away from Rhino. The first one made me genuinely saddened to see what happened to Miles' dad, as he was one of my favourite characters at the time. The second one was just interesting to see everything in there and all the story developments, even though I was kinda stuck there for 20 minutes looking for the key. And the final one actually made me tense, trying to hide from this massive beast as a pretty much helpless kid. The bosses were more hit and miss than ever before. In terms of gameplay, they were all kinda disappointing really. They're all the same. Web up the villain, smack them a few times, then repeat. Therefore, in order for the boss to be good, it needs something else. However, the best bosses, those being Scorpion and Rhino, Mr. Negative and Dr. Octopus, are all fun to fight, whether that be down to the banter in the fight, like in Scorpion or Rhino, or the sheer spectacle and story significance, like Mr. Negative and Dr. Octopus. They're still very good bosses, but the others are kinda bad. Taskmaster was a big letdown. I can barely remember the Shocker fight, Kingpin is really boring now that I think about it, and Electro and Vulture were good, but not good enough to rise to the upper echelon of bosses. On to the second strongest point in the game, the story. Oh my fucking god, I loved the main story so much. It invoked actual emotion from my edgelord self. I was on the edge of my seat for some of it, and I couldn't tell what was going to happen for about half the game, and some parts even made me genuinely sad and angry. It's a masterful tale with realistic characters, or as realistic as it can be when you can swing like a spider, and I even enjoyed the love story of Peter and MJ. I also really liked how it wasn't yet another Spider-Man origin story. This Spider-Man was already more or less settled into his career as a superhero. It felt very fresh. The voice work was also fantastic, with Yuri Lowenthal, or however you pronounce their name, being my personal choice for Voice Actor of the Year for 2018. It was just so good, and I cannot wait for the sequel. I mean, come on, there's gonna be a sequel. However, I said the main game story was amazing, but the DLC story quality kinda dropped a bit. The Heist DLC was pretty good with Black Cat, but Turf Wars was only interesting because of what happened to Yuri's character, and by that, I mean the cop, not Yuri Lowenthal. I mean, who the fuck cares about Hammerhead as a villain? I mean, I'd never even heard of him before this. The city of New York was massive, and it really does feel like you're swinging around a pretty much real city. It's absolutely gorgeous, there's lots of people to interact with, there's tons of references to the outside Marvel universe, and exploring it was a pleasure. And another amazing part of the game was all the skins. They were really varied, and for the most part, they all looked fantastic. Apart from you, Spider Wrestler Suit, oh my god, I hate you so much. The fact that the goddamn Spirit Spider could be used during important story moments in the game was just absolutely hilarious, seeing as the suits applied during cutscenes. Seeing standard cops pretty much talk casually to the goddamn fucking spider incarnate of the devil was just so funny to witness. Unlocking the suits was a pleasure, and though we never got our goddamn black suit, it was still one of the game's best features. Another good feature was the upgrade system. You've got your standard skill tree with the skills that actually make a difference to your combat, and you've got your gadget upgrades, and those all cost different kinds of tokens, which was a pretty good upgrade material. The gameplay, story, upgrades, suits, and world all make the game absolutely amazing, and I wish it could be higher on the list, I really do. But I just can't put it higher. There are flaws, and when you play the game for as long as I did, you can't help but notice them more and more over time. The side missions were honestly kind of a waste of time. The ones that kept me invested was Black Cat, and that's about it. None of the others really contain anything amazing or stand out. Even though I like collecting the backpacks because of the lore pieces and the landmarks were cool to find, they weren't really anything groundbreaking. They still kinda came to the same collect the things mentality, and it got kinda tedious at the end. The things like bases and Sable outposts also got repetitive really quick. It's basically just kill everyone over 6 separate waves, and you can only completely stealth 1 wave per base. The random crimes quickly went from, oh wow, this is cool, I feel like Spider-Man just casually saving the day no matter how big the problem may be, to, oh my god, please, someone commit a crime, I just need to complete 5 more crimes to finish the district, please, oh my god, I need the naked suit, please, now! By the time I was trying to 100% the game in order to get that skin as well as the platinum trophy, it was so tedious and it just lost its charm. Also, the combat system does have its flaws. Yes, it's very fun, but ultimately it can feel annoying after a while, especially in the DLC. There are metric fuck tons of enemies, they all have annoying defenses and takedown requirements, and it's just overly ganky, whereas none of the Arkham games ever experienced that problem. Another flaw is with the world. I mean, sure, I love exploring it, but it's also kind of linear. I mean, there's really not much to it other than just swinging by large generic buildings, no matter how cool they may be. I mean, the Avengers building is still just a building overall. Don't get me wrong though, overall, even with the flaws, the game is absolutely incredible, the best Spider-Man experience you could possibly have, and it's more than deserving to be this high on the list. Controversial picks in a MattTGM list kinda go hand in hand apparently, as a commonly accepted bad Assassin's Creed game comes in at number 7 on my list and number 2 out of all the Assassin's Creed games. Released in 2012, this was the final game in the Desmond era of Assassin's Creed games, and the first major overhaul of the gameplay of the franchise. I played a decent bit of Revelations, over half of Assassin's Creed 2, none of Brotherhood, and all of Assassin's Creed 1 twice, so I got pretty good at their gameplay style. However, Assassin's Creed 3 presented quite a big gameplay overhaul, with the free running now being reserved just to one button, the counter button combat style, and the ability to climb trees. It was all super satisfying and fun, with the combat making multiple enemy encounters feel really amazing. I especially loved double counters, they just made you feel like the awesome assassin that the game portrays you as. The hunting was also fun to pull off, and you actually had other ways of hunting prey other than just shooting it to death. The stealth was also improved, but I don't have much to say about it. I mean, it's just kind of Assassin's Creed stealth. Par for the course, really. The ship gameplay was very solid, even for their first attempt in the series, and it was the origin of the amazing Black Flag gameplay. The upgrade system for the ship was perhaps overly simple, but I really liked it anyways. The world was also massive, but that could be taken as a flaw as well. I'll get to that later. The story is probably my favourite out of all the Assassin's Creed games. Seeing Connor's growth from a naive young boy into a deadly master assassin, while discovering that the Templars aren't the all-encompassing evil that he's been led to believe, was a very compelling tale. The attempt for peace between Assassins and Templars was touching, and it was really sad that it never worked out, resulting in the death of Connor's father by his own hand. It was also pretty sad seeing the story unfold. Connor just suffered one tragedy after another, and you came to feel for the character. It was also nice seeing how kind Connor tried to be to civilians, which in turn led to the homestead missions. I absolutely loved these homestead missions. No matter what the task was, it was seriously touching to do it. Giving Prudence and her husband a new home, saving Ellen from her abusive husband, getting Miriam and Norris married, it all made me feel so heartwarmed. It just made me feel good inside, like I was actually helping people. Oh, and you know that marriage? That's probably the weirdest love story I've ever heard. Cue the super accurate impression. Hey, Connor! What is it? I fancy Miriam. Okay, what will you do about it? I will give that bitch a knife. Bitches love knives. I do not think that will work. Connor, we are getting married! Well, that escalated quickly. I enjoyed Desmond's journey, and I actually really liked every single one of the modern missions. The one at the construction site was an amazing example of parkour and how much Desmond has learned. The stadium felt like an actual modern day assassin experience, apart from Hitman, and the one at the Abstergo Industries was probably my favourite mission in the entire game, seeing as you just got to tear through Abstergo's entire security guard force, and walk out with the Apple of Eden like a god, even though that does make me feel a bit morally questionable making all these guys commit suicide. However, they then had to carry on the modern story after Assassin's Creed 3, and that was kinda mixed in my opinion, but I've touched upon that earlier. Seeing Desmond's interactions with the modern cast, especially his father, was really interesting, and the ending was awesome. Desmond eventually gets into a position to sacrifice himself to save the world, but then Minerva and Juno present to him two differing arguments, with Minerva believing that Juno should be kept prisoner, and the world should be allowed to meet its end, only for Desmond to come out and rebuild it as the new world leader. However, Juno then proposes the argument that Desmond's words of wisdom, as the world leader, will eventually be misconstrued and will give rise to another Assassin-Templar conflict. And it's actually a really interesting argument that I'd love to talk more about, but sadly, this isn't really the time for that. The choice that Desmond eventually makes to save the world at the cost of his life and Juno being released was probably the right decision overall, but I really wish they'd carried out the rest of the storytelling after this happened better. I mean, you've got your hero dead, you've got Juno now released, and now no major events in the modern story happen whatsoever. I mean, come on. The storytelling in Black Flag wasn't really as good as 3 when it comes to the modern day. I mean, your character doesn't even have a face. The DLC, at least the Tyranny of King Washington, was kind of a mixed bag. The missions were sometimes annoying, especially the ones where you have to try and stealth your way through the world, but I overall liked it. Seeing this alternate world with the altered backstory was pretty interesting, and I loved using the animal powers. They were really well done, especially the bear. Oh my god, the earthquakes. Oh yeah, and animals are in the Assassin's Creed 3 game, and you can pet them. That was an improvement. Overall, Assassin's Creed 3 improved upon the series in so many ways, and forever changed the franchise. So why is it so hated? Well, I don't hate it for one. I mean, it's the second best Assassin's Creed game I've ever played, but I do have a couple complaints. Getting back to the world, yes, it's very big, like, massive. However, if your world isn't interesting to explore, why bother making it so big? The collectibles aren't really that interesting, and the world feels a bit bland if I'm honest, especially considering the massive size and how long it takes to get around. Also, the guns and ranged combat could have been better because the aiming system was a mess. However, that was all fixed in Assassin's Creed 4. Really, those are my only two complaints about the game. It's a fantastic Assassin's Creed game with highly polished gameplay that paved the way for Black Flag, it contained likable and well-written characters, and it contained one of the best stories the AC games have ever had, if you count both modern and historical. There's really not much more to say, it's just amazing. Now, for the last game in this video and the last pick outside the top 5, we have Bloodborne. This game was a unique horror experience. Now, I usually dislike horror stuff, but this game was just amazing. As the unofficial 4th Souls game, it pretty much took the quality of Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, and Demon Souls, mixed them all together, and then what we got out of it was a game that was far superior to any Soulsborne game that came before it in pretty much every way. Let's break it down. The combat was actually quite different to the previous Dark Souls games, with the most notable change being the increase in speed. The Hunter is far faster in terms of movement and attacks, and it makes your battles even more exhilarating than they were in Dark Souls. The signature roll is partially replaced by the new Quick Step, which does allow for faster dodging. However, a new feature introduced was counter damage, where if you messed up a dodge, you take double damage. I don't like this very much, it just makes life more frustrating, but it does amp up the difficulty. Now, getting on to the next big change, the weapons. They're amazing. Basically, each weapon has 2 forms, and they can transform between the 2, even while you're attacking, allowing for some cool combo attacks. Each form changes up the moveset, the speed of the weapon, and can even change up the bonuses to damage, such as serrated damage, or extra damage to beasts, for example. Some of the weapons have special skills, and I don't think there's a single melee weapon that I dislike, with the Saw Cleaver, Whirly-Egg Saw, Rakuyo, and the Moonlight Sword being my personal favourites. Speaking of weapons, the shields of the Soulsborne series have now been replaced by guns, and they're also pretty great. In order to parry an enemy, you need to shoot them right before their attack lands, and then you can perform a visceral attack, and it's one of the most satisfying things to do in the entire game. If you don't feel like parrying, you could always use a torch, a shitty shield that does literally nothing, or you could use the cannon. I recommend the cannon. Big damage, boy. The Estus Flasks of Dark Souls were replaced with blood vials. These were faster to use and always healed 40% of your health, but they were also consumable. Once you ran out, you've run out, and you have to buy more or farm them from enemies. While this can be a damn pain, it's also a cool system, and I think it is a potential upgrade over the Estus Flask system of Dark Souls. Also, Quicksilver bullets, ammo for your guns, work a similar way, except they are even easier to farm seeing as a lot more enemies drop them as guaranteed drops. As for the customization, it's less expansive than the Dark Souls series, but it's still pretty solid, and most of the armors are actually pretty good, with you being able to easily change up your outfit for different fights, adding extra resistances. And I say most of them were good because the doll's armor is honestly pretty trash, even though it looks pretty, I suppose. The enemies in the game were very varied, with each area providing a new challenge with some truly terrifying enemies, such as the big-ass werewolves and especially the winter lanterns. Of course, there were the sucky enemies, like dogs, but hey, win some, lose some. And of course, being a Soulsborne game, a large majority of the bosses were unbelievably amazing. Orphan of Kos, Ludwig the Accursed, Gehrman the First Hunter, and Lady Maria, to name a few, are all absolutely incredible to fight, and a large majority of the other bosses are also really amazing. One of the strongest points of the game is the atmosphere. Bloodborne really brings the world of Yharnam to life, and it's positively haunting in some locations. The Upper Cathedral Ward is probably the most tense I've been in a Soulsborne game area ever, apart from the Erythral Dungeon in Dark Souls 3. The Hypergean Jail is also a haunting location when you get there before the Blood Moon, as you're taken there against your will, and the haunting music in the background really can creep you out. Most of the areas in the game are honestly ominous at worst, or terrifying at best. This also works both ways, as they made the Hunter's Dream, your safe house, truly feel like a peaceful place that acted as a place of rest for the hunter. Whether the area was scary or not, one thing that can be said regardless, the game was goddamn gorgeous. The graphics were great, but I'm more talking about the design of the world. Everything looks like a mix of Gothic City and Lovecraftian horror, and it's amazing to witness, and I'll be listing my favorite areas in a later video. As one final point towards the game, the music is godly. While it may not have my favorite track in the Soulsborne series, on average, Bloodborne has the best music. You can divide it into categories. There's the really tense music for when you're fighting a horrifying monstrosity, the calmer but more ominous music when you're just exploring the world, and when you're fighting an amazing foe, the music is goddamn glorious. However, some of the tracks aren't really about any of those things. A couple music pieces are just made to make you feel relaxed, while sounding beautiful at the same time, with Moonlight Melody being the prime example. As for flaws, well, I can't really think of any significant problem with the game. I mean, maybe the dogs are annoying and the grinding for bullets and healing can get tedious, and the chalice dungeons are honestly a pain, but those are really all minor complaints. While all the picks in the top 10 were amazing, Bloodborne was honestly the only one that I really wanted to put into the top 5. And it's such a tight contest between this game and the number 5 entry, you could almost consider this game tied for 5th place. However, I did have to have a definitive ranking, so sadly, Bloodborne missed out. However, the game is still absolutely legendary. It's a masterpiece in game design, and I will hold it as one of the best games ever made for many more years to come. Well everyone, that's going to conclude the choices for this video. We've covered several amazing games already, with Bloodborne being absolutely legendary, but there's still 5 more games that ascend even further towards perfection. I want to thank you all for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on in order to see the final part of this series as soon as it comes out, and leave a comment on this video with your opinions on my choices as well as your own favourite games. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. With all that being said, I'm MattTGM, and I will see you all in the next video very soon.